I had no idea my wife saw me that way. I never realized that, to her, our marriage was nothing but a game she'd already won. But one night, I overheard everything. It began like any other evening. She had her friends over, laughing and chatting in the living room, while I cleaned up in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping, just going about my usual routine when something unusual caught my ear. One of her friends joked about how difficult it was to get men to listen. My wife responded loudly, almost proudly. "Oh please, I don't have that problem. I've got him trained like a dog." Laughter erupted. I froze. She continued, boasting about how she had studied how to manage a man. Books, articles, online courses. She had absorbed everything she could find about female empowerment. But instead of lifting herself up, she wielded it as a weapon. She went on, explaining to her friends how she had carefully shaped my behavior, making me believe I was making my own choices, while, in reality, I was simply following the path she'd set. He does what I want without even realizing it. If I want him to stop doing something, I punish him. Not overtly, of course. She would act disappointed, withdraw affection, or make me feel guilty until I changed my behavior. And if she needed something from me, she'd praise me, making me feel as if it were my idea all along. "Works every time," she said, as the room burst into more laughter. I couldn't move. I wanted to believe it was just a joke, an exaggeration meant for entertainment. But as she continued, detailing her methods, I realized this wasn't a joke. She listed examples, how she had convinced me to stop doing things I once loved, hobbies, social outings, even certain foods, because they didn't fit her agenda. How she subtly planted ideas in my head and made me believe they were my own. How she'd nudged me into routines that made life easier for her, while I unknowingly sacrificed my own happiness. One of her friends asked if she ever felt guilty. "Why would I?" she scoffed. "It's not like he even notices." "Besides," she added with a smile, "isn't that what marriage is? Either you train them, or they train you." I gripped the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. Memories, once ignored, suddenly made sense. The times I had wondered why I had stopped doing certain things, only for her to dismiss it casually. The way my habits shifted without my realizing. How every argument always ended with me apologizing, even when I wasn't sure what I had done wrong. I wasn't a husband. I was a project, and she was proud of it. When they shifted to another topic, I didn't hear them anymore. My mind was deafened by the truth. I walked away from the kitchen, from the house, and from everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I needed air. I needed space to process the fact that the woman I trusted the most saw me as nothing more than a well-trained pet. One thing was certain. The leash was coming off. Every compromise, every decision, every fight where I backed down, apologized, and adjusted my behavior without even realizing I was being manipulated, I would no longer be a part of that. The next morning, I watched her move around the house as if nothing had changed. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and casually asked if I could take care of a few things for her that day. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I needed to know how deep this ran, so I started paying attention. At first, it was small things. I noticed how she always framed requests as if they were favors I had already agreed to. "Since you're already heading out, could you pick up a few things?" she would say. Except I wasn't already heading out. But the way she said it made it feel like I had made that decision myself. Then there were times she acted disappointed, not angry, not upset, just disappointed whenever I did something she didn't like. I had always hated that feeling. It made me question myself, made me want to fix things. And that's when it hit me. That was the point. She had trained me to avoid that reaction at all costs. I started looking deeper. I went through old messages, rereading texts I'd once brushed off. There it was, plain as day. Subtle shifts in wording, nudging me toward decisions she wanted. "It's fine. Do whatever makes you happy," she would say when she didn't want me to do something. But she never outright said it. And every time, I backed off, trying to avoid upsetting her. Then I remembered the books. She had shelves full of them. At the time, I never thought twice about it. Self-help, empowerment, relationship psychology. Now, they felt like a manual on how to control me. I pulled a few from the shelf and flipped through the pages. What I found made my stomach churn. Techniques on how to make a partner more compliant, how to shape a man's decisions without him realizing it, how to subtly reward and punish behavior, reinforcing habits over time. It was all there, step by step. And I had followed it without even knowing. I thought back to the things I used to enjoy, the hobbies and habits that had slowly faded away. When had I stopped playing guitar? When had I stopped planning nights out with my friends? When had I started asking for permission without even realizing it? This wasn't just the natural give and take of a marriage. She had designed it. And the worst part? It worked. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just awake. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting. I was seeing. And once I started seeing, there was no going back. Now, it was my turn to make a move. I didn't confront her, not yet. I knew if I did, she'd twist it, play the victim, tell me I was imagining things, accuse me of overreacting. I wasn't going to give her that chance. Instead, I played along. I nodded when she made her usual subtle demands. I acted like nothing had changed, responding the way she expected me to. I never realized how little she thought of me. It never occurred to me that, in her eyes, our marriage was nothing more than a game she had already won. But that night, I heard everything. It started out like any other evening. She had her friends over, laughing and chatting in the living room, while I cleaned up in the kitchen. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, just going about my usual routine, when something grabbed my attention. One of her friends made a joke about how hard it was to get men to listen. Without missing a beat, my wife responded, loud and clear, "Oh please, I don't have that problem. I've got him trained like a dog." The room burst into laughter. I froze. She continued to boast about how she had studied ways to manipulate and control men. Books, articles, online courses. She had absorbed everything she could find about female empowerment, but not to empower herself. No, she had turned it into a weapon. She proudly explained how she had shaped my behavior, making me think I was in control, while I had unwittingly followed a path she'd laid out for me. He does whatever I want without even realizing it. If I want him to stop doing something, I punish him. Her words hung in the air, casual and cruel. She wasn't talking about some exaggerated fantasy. This was her reality. She listed examples. How she had made me question things I used to love, hobbies, social events, even food, simply because they weren't convenient for her. How she had planted ideas in my head, making me believe they were my own. How she had nudged me into routines that suited her, while I sacrificed my own comfort without even realizing it. One of her friends asked if she ever felt guilty. "Why would I?" she scoffed. "He doesn't even notice." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't a husband. I was a project, a tool she had molded to her liking, and I hadn't even seen it. I wanted to believe this was a joke, but it wasn't. The evidence of everything I had missed suddenly flooded my mind. The countless times I'd questioned myself when I'd stopped doing things I used to love. How arguments always ended with me apologizing, even when I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. I had been manipulated, trained, and controlled. I had lost myself. That night, I walked out of the house, needing air, needing to clear my mind. I had trusted this woman. I had loved her. And yet, I had never been seen for who I was, only for who she could make me be. The next morning, she was just as she always was. Sweet, affectionate, acting like nothing had happened. But I wasn't the same anymore. I had seen the truth. I decided I wasn't going to let it slide. Not anymore. I started paying attention, noticing the subtle ways she still tried to steer me. The little things. How she always framed requests as though they were favors I had already agreed to. "Since you're already heading out, can you pick up a few things?" Except I wasn't already heading out, but her tone made it feel like I had decided it myself. I began to see the patterns. The way she subtly manipulated me, making me feel guilty or praised to get me to do what she wanted. But now, I understood what she was doing. I wasn't going to let her win anymore. I took small steps, moving quietly but decisively. I reached out to a lawyer, not for a divorce, not yet, but to understand my rights. I needed to know what I was legally entitled to if things fell apart. I started looking into our finances, bank statements, and joint accounts. I realized just how much of my income had gone toward things that benefited her, rather than us as a couple. I set up a separate account. Nothing too noticeable, just enough to begin building a safety net. I started reconnecting with old friends I had let fade away. People who knew the man I used to be before she had reshaped me. Slowly, I remembered who I was, who I could be again. She noticed the changes. One evening, she asked, "Why are you on your phone so much?" "I'm just talking to an old buddy," I replied casually. Her smile tightened. "Oh, that's nice." She didn't press the issue, but I could tell something was turning inside her. A few days later, She began showering me with affection, complimenting me, cooking my favorite meals, acting like the perfect wife. I knew what she was doing. Positive reinforcement. She could feel the shift, and she was trying to pull me back into my role. But I didn't fall for it. I let her think she was succeeding, but in reality, I was taking my power back. I made sure to gather every important document, our mortgage, insurance policies, even the paperwork for the car. I backed up texts, emails, anything that might come in handy. And when I was certain I had control over my own life again, I made my move. The moment had to be perfect. I couldn't rush it. If I did, she would twist the situation in her favor. I needed everything lined up, legally, financially, and emotionally. Then, one evening, when she returned from a shopping trip, arms full of bags, bought, of course, using our joint account, I was ready. She barely noticed me as she walked past, already on the phone bragging to a friend. I sat at the dining table, waiting. When she finally noticed me, her frown deepened. "What's with the look?" I slid the folder across the table. "We're done," she scoffed, trying to mask her surprise. "Done with what?" I let the silence linger before calmly saying, "This marriage. I know everything." Her eyes flickered with panic before she masked it. "What are you talking about?" She laughed, but it was forced. I slid the folder toward her. Inside was everything. Proof of my contributions to the house, legal documents, financial records, and most damning of all, printed messages and social media posts where she had bragged about controlling me. She flipped through it, her fingers trembling with each page. "Where did you get this?" "I've been paying attention," I said. Her face turned cold. "And what exactly do you think you're going to do with this?" "I already did it." I told her. "The house is mine. The accounts have been split. It's done." She slammed the folder shut. "You can't do this to me." "I already did," I replied. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't just following her lead. I was in control. She tried to backpedal, her voice shaking. "We can fix this. You're just upset. Let's talk." I shook my head. "I'm done talking." She stared at me, searching for any hint of weakness, but I gave her nothing. She wasn't in control anymore. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice softening. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. The fear in her eyes was clear. She wasn't used to me being indifferent. She tried again. "We've been through so much. You can't just throw everything away over some misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I almost laughed. "I've laid everything out for you. You still think you can twist this, rewrite the story to make yourself the victim? Tell me, when was I supposed to realize that I wasn't living my own life anymore? Before or after you trained me like a dog?" Her face went pale, and I finally saw the true fear in her eyes. For just a moment, the carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing the raw emotion underneath. Anger, frustration, and a desperate fear of losing control over something she had thought was secure. But just as quickly, she recovered. She scoffed and shook her head dismissively. "Wow, so you're going to believe I meant all that literally?" Her tone was sharp. "It was just girl talk, exaggeration. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "No," I replied, my voice calm, unwavering. "I see it now. Every decision I thought was mine, every change I made in myself believing it was my choice, it was all you. You took control of my life and made me think I was in charge. And the worst part? You were proud of it." Her face twisted in rage. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You want to play the victim now? Like I'm some master manipulator and you were just some helpless pawn? Give me a break." "I did what any smart woman would do," she continued, her voice rising. "I made sure I wasn't stuck with a man who made dumb decisions. If you were so weak-minded that you let yourself get controlled, that's on you." There it was, the truth, laid bare. No sugarcoating, no manipulation, just a raw, bitter contempt that I had never heard before. I nodded slowly. That's all I needed to hear. She froze, her eyes flickering from me to the folder on the table. She realized it was over. She knew I had seen through her, and there was no turning back. But she wasn't finished. Her voice dropped into a menacing tone, heavy with threat. "You think you can just walk away from me? Take my house." "It's not your house," I corrected calmly, the confidence in my voice clear. "And yes, I can. Everything's already in motion." "You think you can fight this?" She spat, her fists clenching tightly. "You have no idea what you're doing." I stood up, meeting her gaze without flinching. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. For years, she had been the one pulling the strings, controlling every move. Now it was my turn, and she couldn't handle it. In the days that followed, she cycled through every tactic she could muster, trying to regain control. First, it was sweetness. She cooked my favorite meals, asked about my day, laughed at my jokes as though nothing had changed, as if we were still the happy couple she had created. When that didn't work, she turned to guilt. "I gave you everything," she said one night, standing in the doorway of our bedroom, her voice thick with accusation. "I shaped you into the man you are, and this is how you repay me." I didn't respond. She had shaped me, all right, but not into the man I was meant to be, into the man that suited her needs. When guilt didn't move me, she resorted to threats, threatening to drag things out, to fight for the house and make me suffer for leaving her. But deep down, she knew it was over. Legally, the battle had already been won. I had been meticulous. She had no case. When she realized she had nothing left, the final shift took place. The kindness, the guilt, the anger, all of it drained away, leaving behind nothing but cold indifference. "Fine," she said, her eyes ice cold. "Go. Take your stupid house. But don't come crying to me when you realize how much you needed me." I said nothing. I just watched her grab her keys and storm out. The door slammed behind her, and just like that, she was gone. The silence in the house was deafening. I walked through each room, taking in the space that had once been our home, but now felt like a prison I had only just escaped from. It was mine now, not just on paper, but in every sense of the word. Over the next few weeks, I stripped away the remnants of her influence. Furniture she had picked out, the routines she had forced upon me, the little touches she had made to mold the house into her image. I changed it all. I reconnected with old friends. I rediscovered hobbies I had abandoned. I started making choices for myself again. And for the first time in years, I wasn't being manipulated, guided, or controlled. I was in charge, and it felt liberating. One morning, as I sat on the porch sipping my coffee, my phone buzzed. Her name appeared on the screen. I didn't hesitate for a second. Blocked. It was a clean break. She had spent years training me, molding me to her will. But in the end, I was the one who walked away, free and unshackled.